Hey guys, Aaronoticz here to bring you my in-depth spoiler review of Marvel's Avengers Endgame. Right off the bat, great, with some flaws in my opinion. So before we start with my review, I'll do a quick recap, a quick synopsis of the film. If you want to skip this part, I'll leave a timestamp right here, and you can just, skip to that part and just get to my review. Avengers Endgame is about, the Avengers dealing with the events and consequences of their defeat at the snap of Thanos. The movie literally starts with Hawkeye's family disintegrating to dust, which hits you pretty hard. What's interesting is the movie wastes no time tying up Infinity War's loose ends. Tony and Nebula get saved by Captain Marvel and brought back to Earth. They find out where Thanos is, confronts him, and find out the stones have been destroyed, and they kill him. Thor does, but which I don't understand what the hell the people at my cinema were watching. Because when Thor beheads Thanos and says the callback line, "I went for the head," which is of course a reference to Infinity War, the people at my cinema laughed, even though the scene was in no way portrayed in anything but a dramatic and tragic light. Then the really huge development happened. They skipped ahead 5 freaking years. 5 years. That amount of time is crazy. Now, I don't know if this was given away in the trailers or promotional videos of this film as it was coming out, since I avoided all of those things and went completely blind when I watched Endgame, so I don't know, but 5 years is still a crazy amount of time to skip. Anyways, in this present, the world is, bleak. I mean, what would you expect from a world that suddenly lost half of its population in the snap of a finger? Scott Lang, who if you recall from Ant-Man and the Wasp got stuck in the quantum realm, is transported to this present. He is basically the guy that starts everything in motion. Kind of. But everything has changed now. Tony is now a father with pepper pots. Hawkeye is now a mass-murdering Japanese-themed vigilante in Ronin. Bruce Banner and Hulk have achieved enlightenment with each other. And Thor has a beer gut. A big one. Yeah, things have changed. Ant-Man convinces the Avengers of the possibility of using the quantum realm to essentially time travel. Stark figures out a way to successfully do so without turning you into a baby or an old man, simultaneously. They gather up the remaining Avengers with Ant-Man, Rocket, and Nebula, figure out their course of action, which is to gather up the stones in different timelines, bring them back to their present, and use the stones to bring everyone that was snapped away back to this new present, without changing or affecting it. So it's like getting your cake and eating it too, I guess. They get into some troubles in the past, even losing Black Widow to get the Soul Stone, which was a powerful moment, and even attracts past Thanos to the new present. They eventually succeed in getting all the stones and uses it to snap back everyone snapped away by Thanos. But then, past Thanos, who is now in this current present, thanks to Nebula's faulty design features, attacks the Avengers base and brings his army to confront them, and vows to not just wipe away half of life in the universe, but now all of life in the universe. So thanks, Avengers. Of course, he'll be creating a new universe, and instead, Thanos isn't a psychopath, people. He cares, even if it's in a maniacally genocidal way. But he still cares. He still cares. Basically, what happens next is an extremely epic fight of massive proportions between Thanos and his army against all the heroes in the MCU, including those that were snapped away. Fast forward a bit, Thanos loses because Tony Stark is motherfucking Iron Man and uses the stones to snap away Thanos and his men into oblivion. Yeah, if that's not irony, I don't know what is. However, this causes Tony Stark's life and caps off the end of his story in the MCU. Then fast forward a bit, Cap is tasked to return the stones to the past where they got it from and chooses to live his life with Peggy Carter in the past and grows an old man while simultaneously passing on the mantle of Captain America to Sam Wilson. And that's how the film ends. I don't know why, but going into this film, I kinda expected it to be a fast-paced, action-packed crossover film akin to what Infinity War was. Probably because the majority of the theories surrounding the film were about who would inevitably beat Thanos and reverse what he did. Heroes like Captain Marvel, Silver Surfer, and even Ant-Man were cited as potential Thanos beaters, as absurd as that may sound. But that isn't really the case, is it? This film is almost the exact opposite of the film that came before it. No, not that. No, definitely not that. I mean the film in the MCU timeline that directly prequels this film, Infinity War. I'm sorry, I should have been clearer on that. That's my fault. Anyways, while Infinity War was a non-stop continuous ensemble of events simultaneously happening at the same time, all intertwined and interconnected with one massive narrative through line. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we did that. Endgame is more of a slow-paced, focused drama about a particular group of characters, mainly the Avengers. After the film quickly ties up the loose ends of Infinity War, the pace and tone comes to a halt and prioritizes showing the world after Thanos, which is by no means not a fault of this film, but even when the actual time heist is happening, the pace doesn't really change much. It doesn't get faster as it arguably should, and certain scenes get affected by this. To be completely honest with you, the time heist, as Scott Lang would put it, is not as impressive as one would picture when the idea is first brought up in the film. It's weird how certain events unfolded, because not all time heists are created equal. There are certain time heists in this film that is more interesting than others, and with the pace of this film being what it is, it's kind of heightened in a way. For example, the New York heist with Ant-Man, Captain America, and Iron Man, I feel like is a lot more interesting than, say, the heist with Rhodey and Nebula. The same way the heist with Thor and Rocket isn't nearly as impactful and emotionally resonant as the one with Hawkeye and Black Widow. And because of this, different levels of importance are given to different heists as exemplified by the length of their screen time. I remember watching the film and completely forgetting about Hawkeye and Black Widow's heist because the New York one took a lot of the screen time. And one last thing about this time heist thing. There are moments where I felt like I was watching a cheap episode of a sci-fi show mixed with a sitcom format, as opposed to a major blockbuster film. The forced antics and awkward scenarios they were thrust upon really reminded me of that. The time travel in this film is interesting, because it doesn't really adhere to past time travel film logic. I mean, it's even a joke told in the film itself. In past films that involve time travel, changing something from the past would indubitably affect the current present. You kill your past self and your current self ceases to exist. Simple enough, though the rules and logic can be exploited, and that's mostly what makes these films interesting because of the ways they show you how they exploit it. That's also what makes it really complicated at times. Avengers Endgame doesn't follow this rule because, as they neatly explain it, going back to the past and changing something doesn't affect the current present because the current present becomes the past and going back to the past becomes the current present. It's a paradox of sorts, and while that is easy enough to understand, it kind of makes the film consequenceless, or at least the events in the film feel inconsequential, because essentially you really don't need to worry about causing a ripple effect by changing something in the past. But that leads to confusion. For example, by going back and failing to retrieve the Tesseract, Loki gets his hands on it and escapes the Avengers' grasp, even though in the original event, that didn't happen the same way. If past Thanos gets defeated and erased in the current Marvel present, then who causes the events that unfold in Infinity War? You can explain it by stating that by changing something in the past, this causes an alternative timeline separate from the main timeline where these characters that we follow exist. But again, that just proves my point of this film feeling inconsequential. Because if changing something in the past doesn't directly affect the present, then you can just pretty much get away with anything. And if you argue that past Thanos terrorizing the present and Iron Man sacrificing his life to stop Thanos is the consequence, first I want you to consider this. The only reason why past Thanos is in the present is because of Nebula's memory drive. Her current self broadcasted her current memories to her past self, which is the reason why past Thanos knew of what the Avengers were doing. Which is pretty stupid if you ask me, because in Infinity War, Thanos already revealed this design flaw to her. Remember how Thanos used that feature to ascertain Gamora knowing about where the Soul Stone is? I can't believe she didn't do anything about that in the time before the heist. Plus, in this film, she kills her past self and it doesn't affect her in any way except emotionally, and as a pretty on-the-nose symbolism of her growth as a character. Again, I repeat, consequenceless. Aside from Thanos being snapped away to dust, this is probably the most ironic thing about this film. Infinity War was arguably Thanos' film. He was the protagonist, the Avengers were the antagonist, And that was mainly the reason why Infinity War was such a groundbreaking revolutionary film. Aside from the fact that it was the biggest, most ambitious crossover film to ever be attempted, it also is a masterclass of a film in terms of writing, in large part due to their take on Thanos. In this film, however, he feels more or less an afterthought. Past Thanos was only there to give the film a final climactic battle. He was there to show up, bring his army, and ultimately get defeated by the heroes. I don't want to take anything away regarding the third act of this film because there are so many great moments, but that still is what it looked like. Thanos was more or less a plot device used to end the story on. Now it all boils down to this. Infinity War was a groundbreaking revolutionary film unlike anything we've ever experienced before. It was able to juggle the massive cast of characters that it featured so well and produced one of the best superhero villains in recent memory. It's a film that not only lived up to its hype, but even surpassed and made a strong argument of being one of the best superhero films of all time. Avengers Endgame at the end of the day isn't the groundbreaking revolutionary film that Infinity War was. It doesn't have a villain as well written as Thanos was in Infinity War, even though it's the same character. It doesn't compare in writing to what Infinity War was, and it's not as ambitious as Infinity War was. That's all just, I think, a fact at this point. But as I thought about the film more and more, I realized something. Does it have to be? Does it need to be the revolutionary, groundbreaking film that Infinity War was? And after really thinking about it, this is the answer that I stumbled upon. No, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't need to be all those things because that's what Infinity War exists for. This film had only one job to do: be the conclusion to the story of these characters that we've followed for a decade now. My earlier points about the film might sound like criticisms, flaws of the film, and to an extent they kind of are. But after realizing what this film is truly about, what this film truly represents, I've gotten a different perspective on them. These aren't flaws of the film. These are more or less calculated decisions purposely done to serve the film and to make for a better film experience. Sometimes, feelings can overpower logic and reason, and that's mostly what this film is about. And to prove my point, I want to talk about Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man. This film exists to give these characters their rightful conclusions to their stories. The plot not only served the purpose of giving these characters redemption by being able to undo what Thanos did, but also a chance to free themselves of the guilt and regrets that still lingered in their hearts, to give them closure. Isn't it weird that the plot pretty much bends over backwards just to deliver these characters in certain scenarios, certain situations that lets them confront whatever past regret they might still have? After failing to secure the Tesseract in 2012 New York, Captain America and Iron Man go back to the 70s to try and get the Tesseract in that timeline. There, Tony coincidentally meets his father, a man he wasn't able to say goodbye to when he was still alive. He gets to talk to him and, for the most part, bond with him and give Tony the closure he needed after all these years, especially after knowing the revelation of their deaths. Captain America, while trying to hide from security, coincidentally enters Agent Carter's office, where he gets a glimpse of her and opens up the floodgates of emotions that Cap had tried letting go of, and is ultimately one of the factors that influence his decisions at the end of the film. And finally, Thor. A guy that is so broken after losing his entire family and home in Asgard, and bearing the sin of not being able to finish off Thanos before he snapped away half of life in the universe, that he becomes a joke himself in this film. His appearance in the film isn't just a funny joke, a funny gag that the writers thought up to make Endgame more fun or hilarious. It has a deeper, more tragic reason for being there. His appearance in the film symbolizes his broken psyche and confidence in himself. So if anyone needed to get closure from their passed away loved ones, it's Thor. And that's exactly what happens in the film. Thor is able to meet his mother and finally gets closure and acceptance of her faith, and even gets a pep talk from her that encourages him and somewhat fixes his broken up psyche and confidence in himself. All neatly visualized in him being able to summon and wield Mjolnir again. The tone and pace of the film being slow adds to what this film is about. It's a character drama, and an homage to these characters we've been following for a decade now. The cheap-like quality that I was referring to earlier makes the film more intimate and feel more personal, to parallel what those characters were feeling in those particular moments. Past Thanos being the final villain just goes full circle with the redemption arc that these characters had to go through in the film. It's their second chance at doing the thing they couldn't do in Infinity War. Beat Thanos. And finally, the film being consequenceless is very much purposely done. I don't doubt for a second that this film will have ramifications in the MCU moving forward. And I am 100% certain that the films after Endgame will explore those ramifications. But right now, all of those things don't matter. What matters now is giving these characters their final chapters, satisfying both us fans and the people behind the personas. And that's really what the film did. Iron Man went out in a blaze of glory, sacrificing his own life for the future of the MCU. Captain America settled down and had the life he wanted and he deserved, but not before getting the ultimate honor of being one of the few that is worthy enough to wield Mjolnir. Thor has finally started moving on by ridding himself of the burden that has kept him from truly being happy. His throne and inheritance, the thing that constantly reminded him of his past failures and suffering in life. He's no longer the king of Asgard, and by joining the Guardians, he has shown that he is now trying to find that something that will truly make him happy someday. All these things add up and ultimately makes Avengers Endgame great. It knows what it is. It's not the groundbreaking revolutionary film that Infinity War was, but it is a love letter to everyone involved with this film. The actors portraying the characters, the people behind the camera, and us fans who will follow these characters and their stories for years now. And as a fan of these films, I cannot be any happier. So thank you, Marvel, and everyone that worked on this film for giving us Avengers Endgame. Whew, boy, that was long. So yes, those were my in-depth thoughts and opinions on Marvel's Avengers Endgame. I had a lot of fun making this video, coming up with what I thought of the film. It was really fun. But again, no film is without its flaws, and I do have some legitimate criticisms of the film. They're not big, but they still exist. For example, Captain Marvel. For a character that is hyped up so much, she barely is in this film. And though she had some great moments in the film, she wasn't in it enough to affect anything. She shows up at the beginning of the film and at the end of the film in the final battle. And that's it. I really thought with how much Marvel has hyped her up that she'd be a big part of this film, but she really wasn't, and to me, that was disappointing. My complaints about Nebula and her design flaw, they were real. It was pretty hard to just sit there in the cinemas come on, man, why? And lastly, Ronan. They kind of oversell him in the film. Hawkeye personally doesn't change much, especially considering how he was being described as a mass-murdering vigilante that kills Mexican cartel heads and Yakuza members, but in the film, we don't really get to see that side of him, except for maybe one scene, which doesn't really look and feel that brutal. He's just a more melancholic version of the Hawkeye we know. I'm sorry. To even things out, these are my top 10 moments in Avengers Endgame. They're not in any order, but here we go. The awkward Scott Lang moment when the kids were getting the Hulk's picture, Skinny Tony arguing with the Avengers, Thor's beer gut reveal, Captain America's last stand before the cavalry arrived, Captain America wielding Mjolnir, Scarlet Witch owning Thanos, Captain Marvel owning Thanos. That's America's ass right there. Black Widow's sacrifice, I am Iron Man. Yeah, there are so many more amazing moments in this film that I wasn't able to state. But I feel like if I list down every single one of them, we'll be here for a long time. But yeah, we'll end the video there. I hope you enjoyed my in-depth review of the film, and if you did, I'd truly appreciate it if you just leave a like, click that subscribe button, and leave a comment while you're at it. Aaronoticz, blasting off. Wait. I do plan on making a video on Thor, the real reason why he looks the way that he is, which I kind of touch upon earlier, but I want to be more in depth. I want to go in more detail with that. But yeah, like, I don't know when, but it'll be out. It'll be out. I promise you, it'll be out. So yeah, that's it. Aaronoticz blasting off. This is for real this time. Peace.
シャララいつかきっと